Okay. Guys, thank you. All right, here we go. We're going to talk about managing the economy in terms of public policy today. All right. Some of this you may have gotten in economics. Some of it you probably should have gotten in economics, although apparently you didn't. All right. So we're going to talk about how the United States government can try to regulate or influence the economy. Understood? All right. First, you need to understand, or hopefully you know, that there are two different types of economic policies. There is monetary policy and there is fiscal policy. These are not synonyms. Okay? Understand this. These are not synonyms. They do not go together. Okay? You cannot simply replace one with the other. Okay. If I were to draw that on the board, can you recognize it? What is it, Jake?
I don't know what, I don't remember what it's called, but I know what it is.
I don't need a name. I don't, honestly, because I'm not an economist, I don't know the name. But I know it is a basic model of. What is it a basic model of?
Economy.
What type of economy? A capitalistic economy, right? We understand that in the United States, for the most part, we're a capitalistic country. For the most part. All right? For the purposes of testing, we're a capitalistic country. How's that? Okay, so what we're going to talk about today is how government is going to respond to this issue. Because within capitalism, inevitably you have periods of growth, or boom, or whatever you want to call it, and then recessionary periods or periods of a bust. Right? These are inevitabilities. So, first, we have what's called fiscal policy. Fiscal policy relates to taxing and spending. That's all it is. Okay? Taxing and spending. Then we have monetary policy. Monetary policy refers to the amount of money that is actually in the supply. Right? The amount of available sort of cash. Right? So, real quick history lesson here. The U.S. Constitution gives Congress the ability to regulate interstate and foreign commerce. Congress uses this as sort of its grounds for trying to manipulate economic responses. This first really begins to happen in the late 19th century during the Industrial Revolution. All right? It's at that point in time that we realize that Congress needs to take at least some sort of role in what's going on, because we have to have some sort of governmental reaction to ensure that we basically don't end up in a situation where some small subset of the population can take advantage of everyone else and sort of manipulate what they're doing financially. Understood? All right. And obviously we know that government response to the economy increases even more during the Great Depression, when the U.S. government begins to do more and more in terms of basic sort of economic policy. All right? So, Keynesian economics. You ever heard of this guy? They tell me that apparently you don't have to learn this in economics.
We didn't learn the person, but we learned like.
You learned the economic theory.
Yeah, the same PowerPoint.
Okay. Somebody told me that apparently one of the econ teachers literally wrote his name up and then drew an X through. Said you didn't even need to know it at all. Okay. So. Alright, so Keynesian economics. Here is the theory. Alright? When you find yourself here, right? And it's always difficult to know exactly where you're at. when you find yourself there, what is government's response supposed to be? Well, this is all, so Keynesian economics is a fiscal response. Alright? So understand that. We're talking fiscal policy. Fiscal policy pertains to what? Taxing and spending. That's it. So, Keynesian economics then, we're going to do something as it pertains to taxes and something as it pertains to spending. Right? We're in a recession. What do you think we want to do? Spend more, okay. What about taxes? You say decrease? Yeah, everybody's in agreement? Okay, so we're going to decrease taxes, we're going to increase spending because we're in a recessionary period. Alright? That means when we find ourselves over here, right, now what becomes our policy?
Increase tax. Decrease spending.
We're going to increase tax, we're going to decrease spending. And so, this is the basics of Keynesian economics at its most basic level. Alright? Now, let's talk about the actual theory. So, if we're in a recessionary period, why do we want to decrease taxes?
People have more money to spend.
So people have more money. Right? And then why do we want to increase government spending? To try to stimulate the economy. Excellent. Alright? So, when we're in a period of growth, why do we want to increase taxes?
There's not a lot of money circulation, so it leads to inflation.
Okay, to try to curb inflation. Alright? That's the real issue there. Same reason why you're going to decrease spending. Right? But let's also think about it in this term. If you decrease spending, if you decrease taxes and you increase spending, what do you inevitably run?
Deficit.
You're in a deficit. Right? Oh, that's an E. I don't know.
No, it's.
Is it an I? We'll just put a dot over an E. I have no idea. Okay, I can't spell. Alright? If you increase taxes and you decrease spending, what should you have over here?
Surplus.
Okay? Theoretically, you're going to offset the two. Right? And this is a way to determine or to dictate or maintain some sort of balanced federal government over time. Right? Obviously, in an individual given year, you might run a deficit. At other times, you might run a surplus. Use the surplus to pay off whatever debt you accumulated during periods of deficit spending. Right? So this is all understood then, right? Wonderful economic theory. And I keep using the term theory. Why does it not work in reality? There's two really, really pertinent reasons why this doesn't really work in practice. Okay? No? And let's take the easiest one first, right? Show me by raising your hand, how many of you have ever, at any given time, looked at the amount of money you had and said, you know, I'm doing pretty well. I think the government should take more of my money. No one. Okay? How many of you have ever thought, you know, the economy just recovers a little bit more. I would love to pay for that $50,000 college education, $50,000 annual college education, all by myself. I don't need any sort of government stimulus to help offset my college education. Nobody? So none of you have ever been in favor of increased taxes or decreased spending? Does this ever work today? Can you get this to work? No. Because no American in their right mind is ever going to be like, yeah, I would love to pay more in taxes. Right? You know some words you will never hear out of my mouth? Yeah, I would love to pay back all of my student loans. Because it ain't happening. I'm not doing it. Oh, no. Because I'm a teacher, I only have to pay back based on my income for 10 years. And then once that 10-year period is done, because I'm a civil servant, they erase the remainder of my debt. Okay? So there's certain programs that exist for that. Now, here's the funny thing. They charge me, my student loan, my payments are based on the amount of money that I make. And when I taught in North Carolina, because teachers make so little in the state of North Carolina, that every year, right, actually every month, that I paid off my student loans while I was living in North Carolina, my student loan debt actually went up, not down. How's that possible?
You're paying less than what the interest was?
Paying less than the interest on the loans. And yet it still counts as a month worth of payments for my 120 months or 10 years that I gotta pay in order to have my loans forgiven. Right? Now, anybody in their right mind think anyone in my position is gonna be like, no, I'd really like to pay back all of my loans. Oh, of course not. Right? Some of you might be like, no, you should pay back all of your loans. That's terrible. Right, Emma? It's probably what Emma's thinking right now. It is, isn't it? Okay? Regardless of what the program is, okay, when it helps you specifically, you're not going to just voluntarily give it up, right? And in reality, what we want when it comes to controlling spending, we don't want to give up what we get. We want other people to give up what they get. Alright? Which again, is why this will never work. Now, I told you there's really two problems with it, right? Okay? Let's have a little fun. Emma, come here. Yeah, come here. I would like for you to put on that little graph where we are today. Economically, where are we today? Go ahead and identify. Are we in a recessionary period? No, we're certain of that. Okay, we're in a period of growth. No, somebody said no.
Well, maybe maybe a tiny bit.
Well, no, hold on. This is just Emma. Emma, please put it wherever you want. No right or wrong answer here, Emma. Wherever you want. Christian, go ahead and get up. You can come next.
There is a right or wrong. Okay.
There's not. There is no right or wrong here.
Because it's not like how we do it.
Yeah.
No, close to the top. No.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna put mine.
And I agree.
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Maybe a little bit more.
Oh God, I feel so bad for you.
Yeah, I
That's
guess-
where you think we are.
Yeah.
There is no right or wrong answer.
Well, you just
But that's
said
terribly
there.
pessimistic. There's no right or wrong answer, but that's terribly pessimistic. You think we're about to hit the top and it's going to go down again? It's already been going down.
Clearly
Come on.
That's the wrong answer.
So there are right and wrong answers.
No, absolutely not.
But mine is wrong.
No, I didn't say it was wrong. I said it was pessimistic. There's a difference.
There is an answer.
You said here?
Whoa.
Oh, that's terribly pessimistic too.
2008, man.
Look.
But 2008.
That's a terribly optimistic answer. Right? I mean, guys, there's no right or wrong here, right? But I literally have one student who says that we're starting on the downhill, a couple of students who say we're almost at a peak, and then one that says we're just getting out of a terrible bottom out. Right? What's that? What's the trough? Isn't that the term? I think it's the term. Trough? Did I pronounce it wrong? Trough, okay. So, what conclusion can we draw from this little exercise?
People have different
What?
opinions.
It's actually almost impossible to know with any certainty exactly where you are in this model at any given time. It's really easy to look at the 1990s and be like, oh, the 1990s was right there, right? We all know this because we know what happened in 2001, right? It's really easy to look at various periods of history and place them accurately on these different, somewhere on the model. But it's really hard to determine today. And so, like I said, what I've got are two of those three I would say are fairly pessimistic, right? Because I'm going to make the argument it's not great right now, okay? But if it's going to get worse, that's, Austin, I fear for you, especially because you're a young man, right? Those of you that think that we're almost at another peak and it's going to dip down, honestly, I would kind of make the argument that we didn't even, you know, if you take this across as a graph, I don't think we hit that level, in which case your valley's going to, it's actually negative growth. You understand? Well, but that's the other thing, because it's really hard to determine what's going to happen in 2 months or 3 months or 6 months that's going to show us where we've actually been, right? I mean, here's the other thing. Let's think about this for a second. What are some of the models or some of the indicators we use to determine where we're at? Okay? So GDP, inflation, what are easier things to understand?
Unemployment?
Do you fully understand unemployment?
No.
My guess is you don't.
Isn't it like,
Unemployment, so
looking for a job in
Yeah, that hurt.
there's different classifications for unemployment, because there's unemployment, underemployed, and all sorts of other things. And then there's issues as to who actually counts and who doesn't count. What about the stock market? We use the stock market as an indicator of how strong our economy is? That's relatively easy to understand, right? Well, but so does our model here, right? And what we're really looking for is this line. And this line for the stock market for the last, let's say, 5 years, what's it been doing? Going up drastically, right? In fact, we've seen drastic increases in the stock market over the last 5 years, right? What about median income, right? So average income. How's that been? Going down, right? Unemployment, going down, right? But that's something that you can manipulate a little bit, right? So even when you look at some of the indicators, depending on what indicator you're using, it's difficult to determine exactly where you are on the model, right? And so I mean this wholeheartedly when I say and I'm not telling you that your answer was wrong,
Yeah.
okay? I don't know, okay? I would hope, I mean, in all honesty, I would hope that you're always right there. Because that means that it's better off today than it was yesterday. Now, it's not sustainable, right? But that would be the hope. That would be sort of the optimism. Okay? Whereas if you're thinking you're over here somewhere, not real optimistic, man. You're telling me you're going to be worse off in 6 months than you are today. Oh, it's absolutely possible. Again, we have no way of knowing what's coming in the future, which makes this really difficult to determine. All right? So, next, we have what are called supply-side economics. All right? So, supply-side economics, this is another economic theory. All right? Now, if you're a Republican, right, you use the term supply-side economics. If you're a Democrat, what do you call this? What? Trickle-down economics. Right?
Trump's trickle down.
Right? Or if you're Hillary Clinton and you want to pretend that you made this up all on your own, trumped up trickle-down economics. And I'm 99% certain she did not make that up herself.
oh, I know she.
Yeah,
Yeah, no, she did.
not a great. Okay, so this is another economic theory, and it pertains to fiscal policy. right? Because supply side economics deals specifically with what? Taxes, right? And so here the theory is that we're going to cut taxes in order to have people reinvest in their own businesses, right? Or cut taxes in order to allow people to have money to create new businesses. And then that will cause unemployment to go down because as people reinvest in their businesses and create new businesses, they're gonna have to hire workers. And so then unemployment goes down and incomes go up, and because incomes go up and income tax not the actual tax rate, but the revenue goes up, right? Thus more money into the treasury and government is doing well, right? Is this an accurate economic theory? Is it accurate in practice?
Yes. Oh, wait. In theory, yes.
No. In practice, when you cut taxes so that people can invest in business, does it increase employment? Yes. Alright? Do you also have, well, one, do 100% of the people that are getting their tax break, do they reinvest? No, absolutely not. You're never going to get 100% of the people to do anything. Right? You're going to have some percentage of the people that takes that tax break and simply give themselves larger bonuses, right? And they take more money for themselves as a result, right? Other people will reinvest, right? But when people are reinvesting, what type of jobs do they generally create? I wouldn't say minimum necessarily, but lower wage jobs, right? And that's why they call it trickle down. Like that's why you get that negative connotation, because the rich people get to keep a lot of their money, and we give just a little bit to the poor, okay? Because it gets spread out amongst the poor, and so they don't get quite as much. Ultimately, one thing that this does cause, one sort of detrimental or negative aspect of supply side economics, is this increases our income gap, right? So when you engage in supply side economics only, like if that's your only economic policy, right, the rich get richer, we're getting a little bit more, okay? But you increase that gap considerably. Alright? Monetarism. This is monetary policy, right? So this is the opposite, well, not the opposite. This is the counter to fiscal policy and Keynesian economics that we understand. In AP Econ, they teach you about the Fed, yes? Yeah? So we learned about interest rates in the Fed and how the Fed manipulates interest rates? Yes, so I can pretty much gloss over this. Okay, so that's one tool of the Fed and monetary policy. What's the other one? You know the other thing that the Fed can do? No, the Fed doesn't print money. There's one other thing that they can manipulate. Well, they're trying to control inflation. That's what the Fed's ultimately trying to do.
The money supply.
Well, interest rates manipulate the money supply. This is another thing that manipulates the money supply. The Fed deals in monetarism, right? So monetary policy. The other thing is, do you know the term banking reserves? That rings a bell now? So banking reserves, that's the amount of money that banks have to keep in actual cash or actual assets, right? How many of us have a savings account? Right? So if you went into the bank and you asked for all of your money back, you wanted to close your account, does the bank have all of your money?
No.
They do not. Okay? They have some percentage of your money, but then they have some percentage of everybody's money. And so if you want to close your account, they give you a little bit of everybody's money until your account is closed, right? Until they have enough to pay you back, right? And so by requiring, the Fed's what does this, by requiring more to be in reserve, you're decreasing the money supply, alright? And that's a means of trying to control inflation. By allowing less to be in reserve from the banks, you're incentivizing banks, or you're telling banks basically, go out and give people loans. This is a means of trying to introduce more money into the economy, right? So to increase the monetary supply, thus stimulate economic growth. right? Same concept with interest rates. When the Fed sets interest rates really low, it incentivizes people to take out loans. Okay? Conversely, when the Fed has interest rates that are really high, it incentivizes people to not take out loans, right? Thus manipulating the amount of money that's actually in the monetary supply. All right, real quick, some modern sort of aspects of this. We actually had a push for a balanced budget amendment. It failed. I'm going to be 100% honest with you. Part of the reason that it failed is actually a legitimate reason. And this right here, Keynesian economics, is the predominant sort of theory that the United States government functions off of. All right? In which case, the U.S. response during depressionary periods is to increase spending. When that happens, you have to run a deficit. So a balanced budget amendment doesn't really work because you would sort of handcuff Congress and not allow them to do things that would actually at times be in the best interest of the country. There would be instances where running a debt would actually be beneficial. All right? Additionally, the whole line item veto, that would have probably been a good, at least a good economic policy, right? So if you had somehow allowed line item veto just for appropriations or for finance, probably would have been beneficial to the economic policies of the United States, but you couldn't have line item veto across the board, which again is what we went over. All right. And then this whole idea here with the end of the Cold War, the idea was that we were going to decrease spending on defense and increase spending on entitlements, right? Because now that we're at peace, we can give more money to the people. That's not how it happened. That didn't happen at all. And two, if the Cold War ends in 1991, because that's when the Soviet Union falls, have we really been at peace for very long since then? Right? I mean, even in the 90s, Clinton was bombing Bosnia and other places. Like, we weren't really at peace at any point in time in that period. All right. Then the last thing in terms of managing the economy, we've got to talk about trade deficits. Okay? I'm going to assume at this point, because Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders beat this to death on the campaign trail, you probably have a basic concept of what trade deficits are now.
Yes.
Okay? So we import more crap than we export. And the vast majority of it is crap. All right? It's just the nature of what it is. Okay? The truth of the matter is, if you want to have a good economy, okay, you should be dumping more of your crap on other countries and having them buy it from you than the other way around. All right? You would think that the way to fix this is to impose tariffs on other countries, yet because of a large number of things, we've actually moved more and more away from tariffs. We are entering into sort of a globalization, or at least some sort of global economy, which makes it really difficult to sort of combat those things. All right, we're going to stop there. Haley, do me a favor. Hand one of those out there.